But we
Well,
have not seen, what we have not seen are gang members committing violence. What we have seen are ICE
But
agents
hold on one second.
kill people.
But Tiffany, you're saying that based, you're just making a supposition here. There's no concrete evidence of
you got to be
actual
careful.
voice
That's
numbers
that's
and
way
there was
offside.
some supports.
DHS.
There
These
was
are
some.
Men and
Well,
women
actually-
serving
well,
the
actually,
government
we have-
support
And there are
police.
bad. I do too, but there's bad ones. We have seen that there's bad ones who are prosecuted
But that doesn't.
and held
let me-
accountable.
let me jump in
No,
for a
but
second.
That doesn't make 98%.
But that's what distinguishes us from countries like Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba. That when there is bad law enforcement, we hold them accountable. And also remember that this force.
Anna Navarro, are you surprised, or what do you think it indicates that Stephen Miller, who normally doesn't back down on anything, is rushing to try to defend himself, to deflect blame, to say that it was someone else's fault and not his, even though he has an extraordinary amount of power in this White House?
I think what it says is that they are getting an extraordinary amount of backlash from the country. I think, including Republicans, including conservatives. I think Americans have had it. I think Americans will not be lied to. Frankly, they chose to, they killed the wrong guy, right? Because this is like the perfect guy. Alex Preddy is the guy you would want to date your daughter. The guy you would want your son to grow up to be. A decent human being who was serving humanity, serving sick veterans, who is, you know, there is nothing that has been said about that man that isn't wonderful. And so they can't malign him. They can't malign him because we have the videos. So they can't say he's a would-be assassin and people believe him. They can't say, as they said, that he was there to commit a massacre. People realize they are being lied to, and they will not be lied to a second time the way they were lied to about Renee Good. And let's remember that this comes on the heels of the Renee Good murder. It comes on the heels 2 days after the baby boy, the 5-year-old boy with a beanie hat, was detained and used as bait. People have had it, Abby. This country has had it, and they're feeling the heat.
It's a heck of a turnaround. You have Stephen Miller, who days ago was calling Alex Preddy a would-be assassin, today acknowledging there could be some fault by the agents. Is this the first time Stephen Miller has ever given an inch on anything?
Hey guys, look, if you think evasive answers and spin can save reputations in 2026 America, think again. The moment the ruling class tries to rewrite the narrative, the public sees right through it. Today we are not talking about another policy disagreement, we're talking about a reckoning, and people are finally calling it exactly what it is. If you have been here before, you don't know we don't water down politics. If you are new, buckle up, we dissect power, expose hypocrisy, and we don't care who it makes uncomfortable. This channel confronts the truth head on. This week, the backlash hit a crescendo after a national figure, someone known for never backing down, suddenly found himself defending that everyone else now sees as indefensible. When Stephen Miller, a top strategist with enormous influence in the White House, was pressed about federal agents' lethal actions, the reaction wasn't defense, it was damage control, and not the good kind. Across the country, Americans are outraged, not just on the left or the right, but everywhere in between. Conservatives, independents, ordinary people who have had enough of being lied to. Why? Because the incidents that sparked this fire are not abstract policy debates. They are real deaths caught on video and defended by officials with talking points that are falling apart. Listen to what CNN pundit Anna Navarro had to say in response to Mueller's defensive posture. She didn't mince words, she didn't hedge. She said this backlash isn't accidental. It's an on-the-ground reaction from a country that feels lied to and tired of excuses. People are not buying claims that this was justified. They are seeing video evidence, they are hearing official narrative shifts, and they are connecting dots in real time. This isn't about one protester, one shooting, or one talking point. It's about a pattern of dismissing public outrage. That's not strategy, that's crisis management by autopilot. And the implications go way beyond Minneapolis. Look, when the government uses lethal force, we are not just watching protest coverage, we are watching a breakdown in the social contract. People don't react like this unless they feel unheard and unsafe. And that's exactly what happened here.
On anything, and it looks to me like the strategy is shifting here, like to Anna's point. The strategy is changing. All of a sudden, you see the leaders sort of backing off and trying to push responsibility down to the ICE agents on the street. And I should add, this is exactly why we need a full and fair and independent investigation, because this is a new fact that we didn't know before. Now, I have real questions about the investigation as currently constituted will be full and fair and independent, but this is an important revelation.
Yeah, and I also wonder, I mean, really, are we really going to say that it's the CBP agents on the ground who are responsible and not the people actually pushing the policy from the White House, the people putting quotas, the people even allowing Border Patrol to be in the interior of the United States as opposed to on the border? Is that really what we're doing here, is casting the blame to the little guy as opposed to the people in charge?
Well, you've seen, look, Stephen Miller was very instrumental in the American First Policy Institute, was the architect of a lot of these things that the administration is doing on immigration, was out in front on this issue. The reporting says that Kristi Noem had checked up the chain, including to Stephen Miller, as to what she said publicly.
Constant contact with the White House is what they said she was in on the day of this shooting.
So now you're seeing Stephen Miller, who, you know, notably, reportedly was not in that meeting with the president on Monday night when you had Kristi Noem, Corey Lewandowski, the chief of staff. He's not in that meeting. That tells you something when you're not in a meeting. So the fact that he's backtracking on some of these things and that they're starting to shift gears, not surprising.
I mean, they lied when it was so clear they were lying. And I think that is unfortunately the effect that this MAGA cult movement has.
Watch this carefully, because this is where the story changes. For days, the White House line was absolute. No hesitation, no ambiguity. The individual killed was framed as a threat. End of discussion. And then, suddenly that certainty evaporates. Eli Honig nails it. This is a turnaround, not a clarification, not new confidence, a retreat. Stephen Miller, someone known for never conceding ground, now acknowledging that the agents on the ground may bear fault. That alone tells you something has shifted behind the scenes. This isn't accountability yet, this is a strategy. Because notice what's happening next. The blame is moving downward, away from policy architects, away from decision makers, away from the people setting quotas, expanding interior enforcement and approving aggressive tactics. Suddenly it's about mistakes on the ground. And Abby Phillip asked the question that matters most. Are we really supposed to believe this all happened in a vacuum? That federal agents just freelance lethal force? That policies returned, approved, and enforced from Washington had nothing to do with the outcomes in the field? That's not how government works, and everyone watching it knows it. Jim Schill confirms what reporting already showed. Stephen Miller wasn't just adjacent to this policy, he was central to it. Architectural, strategic, in constant communication up the chain. So when that same figure suddenly isn't in key meetings, when messaging softens, when responsibility is quietly redirected, that's not coincidence, that's crisis management. And this is exactly why it calls for a full independent investigation matter, not as a talking point, but as a safeguard. Because once narrative starts shifting after the fact, the public has every right to ask, what else don't we know yet? This isn't about demonizing agents, and it's not about absolving them either. It's about whether accountability stops at the bottom or finally reaches the people who designed the system in the first place. And that question isn't going away. If you want, next we can see how it goes later.
We saw the same thing with Renee Good. We all saw what we saw, but all it took was enough of them to say, oh, no, she was trying to run him over with her car. And then across the board, you saw people present it as though it's a debate. Well, what did you see and what did you see? And it blatantly was not. I want to commend CNN's Sarah Seidner for being on the ground, because she was one of the first people that I heard, maybe other people did, but she was one of the first people to blatantly say they are lying. It is clear they are lying. We saw it, and that is so important to the credibility here. Furthermore, there's a reason why we have not seen a resurgence of the Proud Boys. And that is because I believe a lot of them are likely made ICE officers. Again, I've said this on the show before, I've not seen any deep dive reporting into who these people are, but they certainly adopt a lot of the ideology, a lot of the tactics, a lot of the violent tactics, a lot of the wearing masks, and it sounds a lot like their founder, what they initially put out. And so because Stephen Miller backtracks, I don't really care. I wonder about all the incidents that are not caught on videotape. I wonder about all the people who are sitting in detention centers right now as we sit here, who are malnourished, who are without life-saving medication, children.
This exchange is where everything gets combustible. Because now we are no longer just arguing about policy, we are arguing about language, power, and what happens when trust collapses. Tiffany Cross raises a fear a lot of Americans quietly carry. What don't we see? What happens when there's no camera, no live stream, no reporter nearby? She's not presenting evidence in a court of law, she's expressing moral alarm, and that distinction matters. But here's where the line gets dangerous when rhetoric shifts from systemic critique to categorical labeling. The debate stops being productive and starts being combustible. Kevin O'Leary pushes back not on whether abuses exist, but on whether it's fair or responsible to paint an entire federal workforce with same brush. And Abby Phillips steps in for a reason because words like militia, Gestapo aren't just insults, they are accusations with historical weight. And once those words are out there, the conversation stops being about reform and starts being about identity warfare. Jim Schultz's intervention actually reveals something important. He's not saying abuses can't happen, he's saying generalization collapses accountability. If everyone is guilty, no one is examined properly. If everyone is a villain, then leadership decisions vanish from scrutiny. And that's the pivot point, because Schultz admits something crucial. Agents on the ground are responding to pressure, confusion, and direction from above. That doesn't absolve misconduct, but it does redirect responsibility where it belongs: command, policy, and oversight. This isn't about demonizing workers, and it's not about dismissing fear either. It's about recognizing that when trust between communities and enforcement collapses, extreme language fills the vacuum, and that should worry everyone. Because the longer this drags on without transparency, the louder the rhetoric gets, the sharper the accusations become, and the harder it is to pull the country back from the edge. That's the real danger here, not disagreement, not protest, but a system where no one believes the other side is acting in good faith anymore. And once that happens, cameras or not, every encounter becomes a flashpoint.
Children who have been
So did you
kidnapped.
just say ICE officers are militia?
Yes, have you not been paying attention?
Yeah, I
They
think you're
certainly mirror
stretching
the
a little bit.
Gestapo.
You know, that's very.
I don't think I'm stretching anything. I
Yeah,
think we have seen,
that's
what we
what-
have not
Well,
seen,
you know,
what we have
this
not
is
seen are
actually a
gang members committing
this is a
violence. What we
federal
have seen
state
are ICE
mandate.
agents
You're
hold on one
pushing
second.
that a little bit
But
there.
Tiffany,
That's
you're
that's
saying
way
that
outside.
you're just making a supposition here. There's no concrete evidence
You
of
got to be
actual
careful.
Proud
That's
Boys
But
members.
what,
that's
Well,
way
there was
outside.
some supports.
DHS.
There was
These are
some,
men and
Well,
women
actually,
serving the
we
government.
have seen white supremacist tattoos.
Risking their lives,
on-
serving the government,
Risking their
and you're
lives, they're
calling them,
taking lives,
you're calling them
Kevin.
Proud Boy militia.
You're-
Did you say that?
well,
I did not call them
there
a
has been
Proud
some
Boy
reporting
militia,
that
but
Tom
I think it's
Homan coming-
disgraceful
You're
that you're
way
sitting here.
outside.
Tom
Way
Homan
outside.
coming
I'm
to
actually not,
be
but I
put in
think that there
charge.
are white supremacist tattoos on their
White
necks. We have seen-
supremacist federal officers.
Yeah, white supremacist
Okay, that's
federal officers.
like, where are you going with this? Why would you say that?
I'm going with my eyes, ears, and logic. There have been multiple ICE agents who have white supremacist
Men and
tattoos
women
All right.
on
working
their
for
necks.
the
That
federal
is
let me let
government,
Jim have a
risking
word.
their
Recording and
lives,
video.
carrying out a mandate, and they're white supremacists?
Yes,
Hold on,
and you're
hold
a
on.
member of a cult, so I
Hold
don't
on.
expect you to have
Whoa,
logic.
let Jim have a
whoa,
word. Go ahead,
whoa,
Jim.
whoa, whoa.
I think the generalizations here are a bit of an overreach.
Yeah, and
That being
let's not
said,
make
that-
personal
that
attacks.
Tom Homan being put in charge now of being on the ground in Minnesota. You've also heard reporting that some of the ICE officers, a lot of the ICE officers, are feeling a bit relieved now that he's in charge. So I think that goes to the point that Kevin's making, that these folks are people, a lot of them are people who want to do good, that are glad that there's someone coming that's going to give them further direction, that they are going to soften some of the positions. And look, these guys are carrying out orders from above. And the fact that Tom Homan's stepping in is a good thing.
Well,
Tom
there's
Homan
also,
is
that's
not a
okay.
danger
Hold on, guys.
here.
There's
Tom
also
Homan is a
there
big
is also a big distinction between ICE and Border Patrol. They are two different agencies. They don't have the same tactics, they don't have the same training, they don't have the same mandate.
This is the moment the ground shifts. Abby Phillip lays out the reality no one in the White House wants to admit. Immigration was a winning issue, now it's bleeding support. Public approval has flipped, confidence has collapsed, and suddenly ideas that were once politically radioactive are being openly discussed by half the country. That doesn't happen by accident. Kevin O'Leary tries to pull the conversation back to process. He argues for transparency, for investigation, for cooling things down, and he's not wrong about one thing. The execution is exposing how hard this actually is. Mass deportation isn't a slogan when it hits real lives. It's families, workers, neighbors, people who have built lives, legally and illegally, into the fabric of the country. That complexity is where the policy starts to crack. And Anna Navarro steps straight into that crack. She doesn't argue theory, she argues what people are watching unfold. Her point isn't that law enforcement is evil, it's that errors, overreach, and misinformation are visible, and Americans are reacting to what they can see. Phones are documenting encounters, videos are circulating, and once that happens, official statements don't get the benefit of the doubt anymore. Navarro's critique is aimed upward, not outward. She's not saying every agent is bad, she's saying leadership credibility matters, and when officials are caught contradicting evidence, trust evaporates. O'Leary responds with something important: faith in law enforcement as an institution. And Navarro doesn't reject that. She does say something more precise. She acknowledges what most Americans believe at the same time. There are good officers, and pretend one cancels out the other is exactly how accountability disappears. That's why this issue has flipped. Not because Americans suddenly oppose immigration enforcement, but because they don't believe what they are being told matches what they are seeing. When policy collides with lived reality, numbers change, narrative collapse. This isn't about ideology anymore, it's about credibility. And right now, let's see what's happening.
Been happening on the ground in these cities is that you had Greg Bovino, who's a border patrol sector chief, coming in and running immigration enforcement in the interior, and that's been a huge problem. I do want to play, because I think you need to hear this straight from Tom Tillis's mouth, the anger coming from this Republican senator about how immigration has been handled by the Trump administration.
Stephen Miller never fails to live up to my expectations of incompetence.
Why do you think he should resign? Fired?
This is the line that keeps coming up over and over tonight. Accountability. And then Navarro isn't arguing that the law enforcement is illegitimate. She's arguing that legitimacy depends on accountability actually working. What separates functional democracies from failed states isn't power. It's restraint, oversight, and consequences when things go wrong. And when agencies expand rapidly, when policies shift overnight, when pressure comes from the top to move fast, the margin for error shrinks. Leadership matters, messaging matters. When people hear officials speak in absolutes, no mistakes, no responsibility, no limits, trust erodes, not because Americans hate institutions, but because they expect them to be better than that. That's the through line of this entire conversation. Not chaos versus order, not left versus right, but credibility versus denial. People aren't reacting to theory. They are reacting to what they see, what they hear, and what no longer adds up. And once credibility cracks, no amount of rhetoric puts it back together. That's why this debate matters. That's why the public reaction matters. And that's why this movement isn't going away. If you're watching this, you already know this isn't being about one night, one panel, or one headline. It's about whether power is willing to correct itself when it's challenged. That's what we cover here. If you value analysis that doesn't flinch, that doesn't soften the edges, make sure you have subscribed. We'll keep breaking it down, we'll keep following the facts, and we won't look away. Thanks for watching it, guys.
I'm going to leave that up to the president. I can tell you, if I were president, neither one of them would be in Washington right now.
But do you think Noam should step down?
I think Noam needs to decide what. I think if Noam looks at her body of work, I could not be. If I were in her position, I can't think of any point of pride over the last year. She's got to make her own decision, or the president does. But She has taken this administration into the ground on an issue that we should own. We should own the issue of border security and immigration, but they have destroyed that for Republicans. Something that got the president elected, they have destroyed it through their incompetence.
So that's a really powerful point. I mean, he is right that Trump entered the White House with positive approval ratings on the issue of immigration, and now it's negative. Now you have half the country saying they'd be open to abolishing ICE. More than half the country saying they are unhappy with what ICE is doing. Have they flipped this issue on its head, a winning issue for the president?
I think the immediate answer to this on a bipartisan basis is a full, transparent investigation. I think everybody agrees. That is the right way to start cooling things down. Execution of this mandate is becoming scrutinized. How do you do this? How do you actually go get the 25 million illegal immigrants out of the country if everybody agreed to do that at the beginning of the mandate? That's not so easy. We're learning that. Many of these people have ingrained themselves as good citizens into the country. They're providing services. They're paying their taxes. Should we kick them out? That's a big debate as well. But anybody that's broken the laws of the United States that came in here illegally, I don't think you're going to get a lot of support keeping them here. So how do you filter that?
Yeah.
How do you execute
But let me
that?
tell you something, Kevin. They are detaining and have deported people that are not here illegally. When you are here under political asylum, with a political asylum claim pending, like the father and that 5-year-old child, you are here legally. They have detained and deported legal permanent residents. They have wrongfully detained U.S. citizens. And I think, and people are watching it and seeing it, Americans are seeing it, because there are brave Americans out there who are taking video of this. The problem with Kristi Noem is that she's lied. She has lied consistently and been caught doing it. And also, you know, you want to paint the federal agents as if they are, I don't know, some sort of saintly body. They're not.
I believe in law enforcement.
There are good law enforcement.
I support
And there are
police.
bad. I do too, but there's bad ones. We have seen that there's bad ones who are prosecuted
But that doesn't,
and held accountable.
let me jump in
No,
for a
but
second.
That doesn't make 98%.
But that's what distinguishes us from countries like Venezuela.
For more, follow To Chris Politics.